If I can start with Pak Budi and then Kun Tony afterward, can you share with us the essence of your discussions that you just had, and how do you see that the Asian integration in 2015 would pan out in your sector?
Yes, first of all, we have to thank BCG to start it with a very provocative presentations that saying that the regional banks are not giving as much money back to the shareholder compared with the local banks, and the regional banks also doesn't have a much better cost to income ratio compared with the local banks. So we started with a very provocative topic, and there are a lot of discussion happening there. People are sharing their experiences, saying that maybe the regionalizations is not for all products or all business line. It has to be done only for a certain product or business line. There are also discussions, maybe what more important is the standardizations or harmonizations for a certain rules and regulations. And at the end of the day, most of the people saying that the biggest elephant in the room is the regulators. So I think we need to have the regulators in. From my own perspective, it is very interesting because we are talking about liberalization of ASEAN industries, and financial services industry is the most regulated industry in any countries. And what is more interesting, usually the regulator, the financial regulators, is the most powerful, the most protectionist, the most cautious, the most conservative, and most of the time also the most nationalist in compared with any other regulators in the country. So back to the discussion, that biggest elephant in the room is the regulator. Maybe Kunchas.
Thank you, Kunchas. What's your perspective?
Yes, I think we accept that the liberalization of the financial industry is inevitable, and that dovetails with the ASEAN economic integration. However, because of the diversity and the complexity of each of the country, so there will be certain areas where become easier and certain areas where there's still some barriers. So we discuss about different barriers, and as Pak Budi has said, we talk about certain areas could be harmonized or standardized and would make it simpler and easier for greater access. But then there would also be certain areas that would be country-specific, but nevertheless, those are important infrastructure to be developed further. And I think if we go step by step, those things will come at a time, and different areas of the corporate banking, retail banking, and capital markets might have different types of requirements. So the local banks in each of the country still have quite a prominent role to play, and yet there would be also possible ASEAN banks that might have certain areas that would have complementary to each other. So basically we talk about the harmonization, standardization, and specific infrastructure in each of the country.
Thank you. Moving to capital markets, Dato Sri, can you share with the audience here the discussion that we had?
Thank you. We had a great presentation from Oliver Wyman about the state of play in capital markets, broadly that the capital markets in ASEAN have not kept up in terms of trade and also economic growth, and there should be a sense of urgency around this. At the same time, we were very fortunate, unlike you guys, we had the elephant in the room there. With due respect, Dr. Nik. And the regulators contributed to the discussion, as did many of the participants. And basically, I think, some of the big takeaways, one was we had a lot of discussions around the pan-ASEAN exchange. I think there was general consensus, in my view, that the ASEAN trading link is a waste of time, and that what we should be looking at is something more substantive, like pan-ASEAN exchange, where the bigger companies from the region can be dual listed on. And then we use the example of Ayala, a great company listed, not just because you're here, Jaime, I would always say that, yeah. Great company that listed in the Philippines in a market that maybe a lot of global funds will not go to because of liquidity, etc. But if Ayala could then do a list on an ASEAN exchange, it could then access equity capital that it couldn't today. Yeah, and then we could set certain standards of corporate governance, accounting, etc., such that we would have this exchange of premium companies across the region, and thereby attract many global funds that currently are not in the region because it gets difficult to have to cover so many different markets. So a lot of discussion around the Pan-ASEAN exchange. At the same time, whilst some people pointed out that they liked the idea, they also highlighted that there would be a lot of difficulties in setting one up, not least the difficulty that I think Dr. Nick brought up, that amongst us in ASEAN, amongst us in the working group for ASEAN Capital Market, everybody talks about cooperation up to a point, and then competition starts coming in. And even in this case of Pan-ASEAN Exchange, the question is, who would regulate it? Yeah, who would regulate? I would support the Malaysian Securities Commission, obviously, to regulate. Then we also then talked about this whole issue, concept of mutual recognition, and I think it was very interesting to have Dr. Nick there. She seemed to think that the idea of getting a landing on mutual recognition for securities offerings by the time we launch ASEAN 2015 is actually quite possible. Which means that by then, CIMB could raise bond in Thai baht with the prospectus, and then raise or market that into Jakarta, into Manila, into KL. I mean, conceptually, that's going to be doable by the end of 2015. Hopefully, yeah. So I think on our part, what we should do is sort of pull all these thoughts together and send in a memorandum to the authorities. The concern, of course, is what actually will we achieve by the end of 2015? And if they're trying to achieve too many things, maybe nothing will be achieved. If they don't focus on some big wins, maybe all we will get is 5 companies on the ASEAN trading link, which would be really not achieving very much at all.
And Bong, is there anything that you would like to add to Dr. Sri?
Well, one conclusion that one has to draw with the Oliver Wyman presentation is the imperative for capital markets integration in ASEAN. The fact that ASEAN is a net provider of capital and yet is very dependent on Western capital, if you will, and the last few weeks, the volatility of the last few weeks has proven that kind of dependence. So there is a real good in terms of trying to channel ASEAN capital for ASEAN companies. A lot of the discussion talked about what really drives this integration. Is it the regulator? Are it the companies? Is it investors in demand? And everybody had a point of view depending on where they sat, but I think it's really all three. And there were very good arguments really for each of those components playing a role. In terms of near-term goals, December 31, 2015 is just around the corner. I suspect it's very tight for even accomplishing the most basic, but I think there's a real desire there to make the pie bigger. To know that there's a pie to be had, it can be bigger, and that both investors and companies will benefit from closer capital markets integration in the region.
Thank you. Well, healthcare is probably one of the most fascinating sectors in the region, and that attracts a lot of attention. Dr. Lim, would you be able to share what you discussed?
Yes, I agree, and the most difficult among all the topics here, I must say, because it's so diverse, not only talking about people's health, talking about drugs, vaccines, lifestyle illnesses, and whatnot. And I think somehow, healthcare has never been on the top of the agenda of most governments within the country in ASEAN. Infrastructure, yes. Banking, yes. Economics, yes. Every time when it comes to economics and healthcare, I think economics wins hands down. But on a serious note, I think, what we discussed was that people are concerned as to the rapidity of how drugs is going to reach the market, especially newer drugs that can cure cancer, or the newer vaccines for dengue, and so on and so forth. You see, because different countries have got different policies as far as their local FDA is concerned, you see. So approval of drugs takes a long time. And also discussion, on the availability of services and infrastructure between the various countries, with poorest being Myanmar, and of course, the richest being Singapore, Malaysia, as well as Thailand. So where they can afford most of the expensive infrastructure. But having said that, the other thing is, of course, lifestyle diseases is another point that was touched on. With the increasing affluence, within ASEAN, you find that there's a high incidence of lifestyle illnesses like diabetes, coronary artery disease, as well as cancer, and so on and so forth. And also, with development, opening up of casinos, and so on and so forth, gambling addiction, and so on, and other forms of addiction comes into play. So all these non-communicable diseases, was brought up as a point of discussion. And of course, medical tourism fare prominently in most of ASEAN countries. Everybody wants a piece of that pie because that helps in earnings for the country, foreign exchange. So I think generally, these were the issues that was touched on. Perhaps my co-chair could follow up on this.
Yes, Ken?
There's a phrase, patients beyond borders, that's usually used in the context of medical tourism, and it's useful to borrow it here to talk about, to categorize the types of ideas we heard in our roundtable, and I would categorize them under patients beyond borders, doctors and nurses beyond borders, and ideas beyond borders. I think patients beyond borders, ASEAN is the most popular destination in the world for medical tourists. It has the most popular hospital for medical tourists, which is the one I work for, but also the most popular 3 countries in Thailand and Malaysia and Singapore for medical tourists. And when you've got it flaunted, there's some great competitive advantages that we have that ASEAN can project to the world in terms of being an advantage, a place for medical treatment. Having said that, the majority of our medical tourists are actually intra-ASEAN. They're from countries like Myanmar, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And I think we need to be also mindful that the medical tourists are about 2% of these countries. And we have to be mindful of what about the other 98%? And what are we doing to improve the public health infrastructure in the countries that are perhaps a little further behind? Which brings us to doctors and nurses beyond borders, which sounds like a great concept, liberalizing the ability of doctors and nurses to cross borders. We have to be careful about that. It's more problematic because, first of all, because doctors and nurses don't necessarily want to work somewhere else if the earnings are lower there. And secondly, it opens us to a backlash. I know that if Thai doctors and nurses went to work in any great quantities in neighboring countries, there'd be a lot of backlash in Thailand that we're losing the resources to treat the Thai people. So I think that some of the most useful initiatives that we could go forward with are under the third category, which is ideas beyond borders, which include investments beyond borders, management expertise beyond borders, training and education beyond borders. And I think here is where we have the best intersection of commercial interests with public interest. And I think those are where the ideas whether they're for foreign direct investment, whether they're for knowledge exchanges and so forth, medical training cross borders within ASEAN, I think there's a lot of fertile ground to explore here.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I guess we are going to make this interactive, and I will open the floor, and please feel free to ask your questions. maybe just to provoke, I will start with the first question. I will ask Pak Budi. There seems to be perception, at least what I heard in this forum, that the Indonesians are always at the blame for not being open enough and inhibiting the ASEAN integration 2015. Now, there's also been a lot of press coverage about the Indonesian banking sector, given what just happened recently with one of the regional banks attempting to buy one of our banks that's owned by a foreign entity. But you are now the biggest bank in Indonesia. Can you please share with us your thoughts about this and also your aspiration of expanding regionally?
Let me start sharing my view on our banks, and then I will share our view on the recent transactions, which is, I believe, will be a very popular topic this recently. About our bank, it's very easy. In Indonesia is 240 million customers. The saving to GDP penetration is only 35%. Loan to GDP penetration is only 25%. Insurance to GDP penetration is less than 5%. The average return on equity of banks is above 20. So it will be extremely difficult to justify to my shareholders why I have to move to another market and invest shareholders' money and receive 16% return on equity of 12% return on equity. And especially when the market is 100% penetrated or 120% penetrated. So if you ask me my aspirations, my aspiration, I will spend most of my money and time, expanding very quickly and aggressively in my home country. So I think that is very clear on my view. Now the second topic regarding the latest transactions. I think it's a pity. I feel sorry. I think the other two banks, like example, I believe maybe OCBC has around 400 banks in Indonesia, 400 branches in Indonesia already, compared with what OCBC has in Singapore, maybe only 60. So I think the OCBC as a Singaporean bank has more branches in Indonesia rather than in Singapore. I think the UOB has 200 branches already in Indonesia, and I strongly believe maybe they have maybe 50 or 60 branches in Singapore. So again, UOB has more branches in Indonesia compared to what they have in Singapore. Very unfortunate for the other banks, they only have 48 branches in Indonesia, whereas maybe they have 80 branches in Singapore. So I think it's more about, it's not about the openness, because the other bank has even 6 times more branches than what they have in their own country. And I think that is also happened with my colleagues sitting there will agree. I think Datuk Nazir has more branches in Indonesia than he has in Malaysia. So I think, yes, it's a pity, but it happens in this transaction, and I don't understand why it happens. I mean, we need to talk to the individuals that execute the transactions.
Datuk Sri, do you have any comment? What's your observation on the Indonesian banking as relates to ASEAN integration 2015? Obviously, you're a big player there.
Yeah, as far as we are concerned, I think we go with our customers. And since some of the Thai customers are also making foothold in Indonesia, so we select to move and support our customers there. So it's a more limited type of banking services that we do. Of course, we cannot compete with a big player like Bank Mandiri, but so basically move with our customers and service them.
No, I was, to be honest, devastated when I first heard a couple of years, I think about 18 months ago, when we were actually going to have to divest CIMB Niaga, because obviously we purchased CIMB Niaga, and I don't mind, I always share this story, I don't know how many of you have heard it, but when we bidded for Niaga in 2002, yeah, I was told that it was a very competitive bid and that we better put our best foot forward. So we put our bid into IBRA. And then a few weeks later, IBRA called me and said, "Congratulations, you're on the short list." I said, "Thank you, who else is on the short list?" They said, "Nobody." And after we invested in Niaga, our share price collapsed 25% in KL. And that was a time when, you know, we were the first foreign investor really to buy into IBRA. So from that point, when we were really, you know, invited in, red carpeted into Indonesia at a time when we were needed, then suddenly to be threatened with this, you must sell out, it was devastating. Yeah, but I'm glad that, you know, I think the thought process was followed and logic prevailed. And I think today we're very thankful that, you know, that is no longer an issue. I think, you know, we love doing business in Indonesia, and I think we respect that Indonesia has to have rules for Indonesia. And I understand the reciprocity concept that is brought up from time to time. I think that at the same time, I think from the Malaysian perspective, I think Indonesia just needs to understand that, you know, there are issues treating different countries differently. So the rules that are in place for all new entrants into the banking system are largely the same. And of course, you know, what in Malaysia is wanting to issue to Indonesian banks are free licenses. Yeah, whereas, you know, when we invested into Indonesia, we paid a premium at that time, and of course, my cousins, the Yellow Bank, paid a hell of a lot more premium than we did as well.
Can I invite questions from the audience? Okay, well, again, thank you very much. It's, I think it's been a very productive day. If I just may rate my closing remark for the day. This is the first time that we do this network ASEAN forum. It marks an important moment for Asian integration effort. And it is the first time that leaders of corporate ASEAN gathered and expressed our collective support of the ASEAN economic community. And, you know, the council members yesterday gathered and we discussed the possibility of making this event happen every year in Singapore. And, you know, we would like to solicit the audience and the participants' feedback whether you would support the continuation of this to become an annual event. And we must once again thank you, our distinguished speakers, conveners, research partners from Bain, McKinsey, the National University of Singapore for their contribution. And the forum's main deliverable are the 6 sectors reports that will be circulated to our governments. The NAF sends a clear message to the ASEAN public. Our gathering shows the citizens of ASEAN that we are very serious about this AAC and working towards regional community. Every trade agreement and community building effort is dependent upon public opinion. If there is a consensus among people on the benefits of ASEAN and the gains, and that the gains outweigh the cost of this effort, then there will be even more impetus from the policy community to expedite their work. However, there's a lot of ambivalence on the grassroots level about the AAC. This can come from the misunderstanding out of trade policy, how trade policy works, worry of external threats, and lingering suspicion. These factors hinder public support. But as said, foreign policy begins at home. This is what makes the work of the forum even more crucial. As part of our engagement with local communities and the CSI dimension of our work, we should continue to articulate the necessity of building the ASEAN social culture community and people-to-people ties, because this is what will endanger trust and regional cooperation. We believe it was only a few days ago that the ASEAN economic ministers concluded their 45th meeting in Brunei Darussalam. The joint statement indicated that, I love this is so precise, this is so ASEAN, 79.4% of the AEC has been completed, right to the decimal point. Going forward, they said that they would identify and address activities and concrete measures that would address obstacles of realizing the AEC. We are very pleased to be able to support our minister's effort and that we have accomplished what we have accomplished here at the NAF. But as I've said this morning, this is only the beginning. We will continue to play our role in pushing for greater regional integration and building an inclusive and competitive ASEAN. Last but not least, we would like to especially thank the organizer of this event, our colleagues from the ASEAN Business Club and CARI for putting up this event together. And it is, I think it exceeded our expectations. And again, thank you very much. And with that, if I may ask the audience to join me in applause for them.